Brilliant. Well, if I could ask each of the teachers now to share their 3 top tips for presenting at your first CA conference. So let's go in the opposite direction now. Let's start with Pete.
Oh, sorry, there you go. Yeah, so I would say number 1 would be not to overestimate what you can actually get through and be really wary of time. I thought I'd been brief. I know I talk for England, but I thought I'd been brief with my 12 slides with a little, couple of little key points on, but the time just disappeared. So yeah, firstly would be to be aware of what you can actually fit into your time slot. Secondly, I suppose would be sort of a confidence issue and just sort of knowing that your classroom experience is really valuable. That you are the expert at that. I think initially I certainly had a little bit of imposter syndrome, thinking, what can I say really to this type of audience? And yeah, I think I initially sort of experienced that. But there is a lot of value, and like I said, I was really surprised with the questions that people did seem genuinely really interested in what we were doing on the ground in Blackpool. So that was fab. The third thing, and it's just something that just generally, I suppose, is not to assume that everyone has a working knowledge of GCSE and A-level class civ, ancient history, etc. I've come across quite a few academics who don't really seem to know, in wider academia, that don't know that much about GCSE and A-level syllabi. So I think, yeah, just to be aware that there isn't necessarily a working knowledge of that, especially if you're presenting to an international field as well. And also some of the terms that we use in education, I was talking about value added and stuff like that, and there are lots of people that won't even know what that is. So yeah, just being clear and also being aware that you're not talking to people that have that knowledge necessarily.
Fantastic, thanks Pete. And then Jen?
So my main takeaway or biggest tip is to be not intimidated by the nature of the conference, or that it seems so incredibly academic, or that it is a place for academics. Because what I found was similar to what Pete was saying, that a lot of the academics don't have a working knowledge of what's going on in the school, is they were so interested to hear what I had to say about what was happening in the school. Because similar to Pete, I'd had a bit of an imposter syndrome and thought, what possibly can I tell them? These are academics that they won't know. And actually, they had a huge amount that they wanted to know from me. My second top tip would be about preparing what you want to say, because the focus is on you. They're not reading the PowerPoint that's going on behind you. So just think carefully about what you're saying and really practice that. But as we said earlier, don't read from a script, but still plan out what you want to say, but then just deliver it in the way that we would in a classroom or an assembly. And finally, don't be scared by questions from the audience, and actively encourage those questions. I got a few questions asked at the end of the panel, but it was actually when the panel stopped because of the time limit that I had loads of people from the audience come and grab me because they had extra questions. They'd written down my email address, and I got loads of emails afterwards about what we were doing in our school in Leeds, people offering to help. But it allowed me, if anything, to make so many connections with various academics, which is so beneficial to us in schools. And I found that something really, really valuable. And just to finish on, I didn't go to much of the rest of the conference, partly because I was only there for a day, but also because a lot of it was just so academic that I didn't necessarily feel it was appropriate for me, other than a bit of interest. And it would be absolutely wonderful to see so many more teachers there, because I know we're all either fighting for our subjects or doing some really, really incredible things in our classrooms. And it would be lovely for us to share that more, to try get the academics on board more, because if we want more students to go to university to study classics, then we certainly need that.
Right. So some of the similarities, but first of all, obviously, make sure you do all your preparation in advance. Don't leave your homework to the last minute, because actually the conference is a really enjoyable experience. And actually some of the greatest things about the conference is just sitting in the bar, chatting to people, or and just being open to random connections that you make with other people. I mean, basically you can turn to the person next to them and next to you and have a really great conversation. But if you're worrying about your talk because you haven't quite finished your PowerPoint, then you're not going to be able to enjoy that aspect of the conference. So do make sure you finish before you get there. And actually linked to that is that, don't worry, 15 minutes might sound quite a long time to fill to talk to people, but it really isn't. And everyone's got a lot they can say. So it is always better to be a bit short than too long, and you won't ever be too short. And lastly, there's no one who doesn't have something interesting to say. So be confident, submit a paper, and enjoy.
Fabulous, thank you. So now I would just like to hand over to Maria and Ian, who are going to tell you a little bit more about what's in store at Swansea 2022. Ian?
I have been charged with this partly in my role, not just as a lecturer at the university or co-organizer of this conference, but also as the admissions officer for the even older stuff wing of our department. To continue this theme of schmoozy fun, and to almost to as Pete called it, and also to kind of reiterate that academics don't bite. I would like to note that Swansea was recently ranked #1 in a survey conducted by My Voucher Codes, which compared cities' nightlife in the UK on the average price of a pint and G&T, the cost of an average meal in a restaurant, taxi fare, the average rate for a one-night hotel stay, the city's safety score index, and the number of bars and clubs it has per 100,000 people. So what I'm trying to say is that while we appreciate that not everyone will be able or want to come to Swansea, even if you are part of the conference, we would still very much like to welcome you to the seaside. We have, as part, both outside the conference, a good infrastructure here for you to enjoy yourselves, perhaps even with your family, given that this is now taking place in school holidays for pretty much for everyone, which is the reason why we changed the date. As well as that, on the academic or para-academic side of the conference, again, we are looking, Maria and I and the committee here, we're looking at ways of making this the most inclusive conference ever. So that's why that lends some ballast to Jen's pitch about, having more teachers here, talking pedagogy and discussing multiple approaches as we work to try and improve or to maximize the number of people who are passionate about and want to study ancient things at university. And as part of that, we are offering as part of the conference some cultural events including some book readings, as well as at least one excursion to the Margam Stones Museum to look at the oldest surviving Celtic crosses and some Latin inscriptions as well. So it's with that in mind. And the final thing there is the conference dinner, which is to be held in Brangwyn Hall, which is in the part of the complex which is owned by the council, which features murals that were deemed too risque for the Houses of Parliament, and was once a filming location for the Third Reich parts of Doctor Who. So all of that considered, is partly why we are hoping to make this, with all the challenges, especially that of hybridity, a conference that is both inclusive and appealing, and that you might want to come be part of this buzz. Okay, so that's the pitch.
Thank you, Ian. And in the email that you were sent by Jill at the Classical Association, you have already got links to the call for papers from Swansea 2022. So you will see the categories for abstracts. You will have a link to the Swansea website where you will see exactly how the pitch is defined there. And Jill also included a link to the abstracts for the Leicester conference. So as Pete and Andrew explained, it can often be helpful to look at abstracts which have been submitted by other people. And so that link is there. So all that remains for me to say is a huge thank you to you for attending today's event. A huge thank you to our panelists, Ian, Maria, Pete, Andrew, and Jem. And an especial thanks to Jill Durham, the Secretary of the Classical Association, who has organised today's event so well and who is leaving the Classical Association. We're really sorry to have her moving on, but she has been absolutely wonderful, and this is her last public event that she's organising for the Classical Association. So I would really appreciate if we could all give her a massive round of applause to say thank you for everything she's done for us. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone else. And please do fill out the survey. I would really appreciate that. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. That's excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.